Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. I am Barak Malkin, and joining me today are
Ethan Lane Miller.
RDY.
In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. For today's episode, I'm going to take us back to my childhood to start, to my fourth grade gym class with Mr. Povolak, Mr. Pov. He asked me to use the key to lower the basketball hoops, but I was too short. So I stood on a basketball to reach it. And when one of the other kids was telling on me, like, Mr. Pov, he's standing on a basketball, Mr. Pov just looked at me, and instead of scolding me, he turned back to the other kid and said, "That's problem solving." And that is the moment in my life where I realized that I loved math. And I didn't just fall in love with mathematics. I am a firm believer that math can be found in everything, literally everything, in how we use our body, in nature, in art, everything.
It cannot be found in my brain.
Hold on. I even got into a nerd debate with a fellow assistant director when I was at SciTech, Rachel Landman, because she believed that science was in everything. And I think that math is intense, like in all parts of science. So like, I think I won by default, but I'm getting a bit off track. Merriam-Webster defines mathematics as a science of numbers and their operations, interrelations, combinations, generalizations, and abstractions, and of space configurations and their structure, measurement, transformations, and generalizations. So what do you think is the part of Judaism that will connect to the idea that math is a part of everything?
I mean, I think it's easily the book of Numbers, right?
But that is every mathematician's favorite book of the Torah.
Also, there are three types of people in the world: those who are good at math and those who are not.
Yes, 100%. I like your little subtle laugh.
Is it and I'm sure there's a word for it, but like, I know that there's, important numbers in Judaism like 18.
Gematria. There's not going to be gematria. I hope we do that on a future episode. You said, "Oh, thank God." Should I be prepared that when I do that episode, that is not your specialty?
Gematria is like bubblegum Judaism. It's the semi-proving, it's like air quote proving that the truths that we should know anyway with a really cool toy. And that toy is that numbers can be manipulated, not that they have an inherent value. So that's why bubblegum Judaism.
Not a fan.
Here come the emails.
I think they're fun. You can send those emails to me. I believe in you, all you gematria lovers. So the idea that mathematics can be found in everything. So
613 commands.
Is it the idea that math can be found, or like literally math can be found in everything?
I believe literally math can be found in everything. So if
you break things down to the small enough components, like 100%, you're finding math in it.
100%. I totally agree with you.
Is this like the Hebrew language and how it has like the base patterns that are inherent in how we put words together?
It is not, but that's pretty cool. Any other? I'll say it's a really broad topic. And I'll give you another hint. You pretty much just have to replace like one word of my idea.
That math is in everything?
Yeah.
So then God is in everything?
Oh, close.
I was going to be a little...
different word.
There I go, going to God again.
Yeah.
It's such a rabbi thing to do.
Is it too obvious to say math is in Judaism?
Oh, you're like doing the other one? No. I'll set it up now because you're getting so close. Connecting topic for today is that I also think that Judaism can be found in everything.
Oh, totally.
100%. Right? See, even those people that hate math go like, yeah, I totally buy into what you're saying. So let's use the math to help prove what we're talking about.
Oh, proofs.
We'll get to proofs and theorems and stuff. Don't you worry. So as as I mentioned in our intro episode, I received my bachelor's degree in mathematics in college, took every math class my college had to offer at that time. And I found that as a math major, as time went on, math was just made of a bunch of building blocks. You took from previous courses, combined the tools and ideas to learn about the newer, more complicated formulas, and everything was able to be broken down into previously learned equations. All the time, I often got red marks on my tests of like, this was creative, but not what I wanted you to do. Because you can always find the building blocks of the equation that you're trying to get to. So I think Jewish learning happens in a very similar manner, that you read through the Torah each year, right? The story stays the same, but it's our experiences and thoughts that change the way that we view the message of that parsha, right?
Right.
Sounds good to me, man. I will say that was a very kind of silly answer, but the way you described it definitely felt very profound. The Torah doesn't change. I do.
Absolutely.
Well, we're taking all the experiences and those building blocks of who we are, and that is what affects how we learn Judaism year in, year out.
Also, that's the very nature of what we're doing with this project that we lovingly call a Torah Smash. We're finding Judaism in the things that we like anyway, which is the lesson that my parents gave me growing up about Judaism. Shout out to my mom, to make Judaism fun so that I would want to be connected to it for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the modern Judaism, right? That I think in many years past, it was tradition, it turned into community. And I think today we're a lot of the experiences and the values and how that connects to who we are, right? So,
and it's all based on that tradition and community that brings out the who we are.
Yeah.
In fact, that, like I said in our last episode, that it's malleable, that we can keep changing it so that it is applicable to us. We don't have to leave Judaism aside because we don't agree with something someone said one time.
Right.
We can look at it and study it and learn about why they felt that way about what they said and what we could find that does work for us, because there's always something. I mean, Judaism is a really, really old and deep and rich tradition. So there's a lot that's been written about us today, even though they didn't know they were writing about us today.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that's why this podcast is created. And that's 100% right, is that not that I'm looking for it, but in terms of podcasting, I was looking for it, for somebody to just understand and realize and make those connections that Judaism can be found in everything. So let's explore Judaism in nerd culture or in comic books or superheroes, whatever. Like, there's so many books that do this already of, is Superman Jewish from Krypton to Krakow? Like, there's a lot of books that say Judaism is in those things already, right? I know both those examples are Superman, but you can go and listen to any of our previous episodes, listen to any future episodes, and you will discover that Judaism can be found in all of these things, right? And it's a basis for how we live. That's what I think. That's one of my ideals.
Love it.
So I'm gonna move on. Are you okay if we move on to the next piece of this?
Yeah.
Do a little studying together.
Oh yeah.
So if you had geometry or one of the other many math classes that started using letters instead of numbers.
So wait, isn't geometry what the acorn says when he grows up?
Geometry. I wrote a paper.
Oh, that's terrible. I've never heard that before. I love it.
I wish I remember the full title. I wrote a paper once where I had to explain math in the world. And so I drew this symbol as if you were to take screenshots of somebody sawing a tree and showing like that it's a cosine path or something if you put them next to each other. And I called that something like G and I'm a tree as the title of my paper, because it had to do with lumberjacking. I thought it was funny. So thank you for that. Please throw out any math jokes you have in this episode. I want them.
All I have about math are jokes.
That's fine. They all count.
Oh.
All right. So if you had one of those classes that used letters instead of numbers, you likely encountered theorems. A theorem is an idea that's proved by a chain of reasoning, right? Essentially, a truth that is established by showing other accepted truths. So, for example, the Pythagoras theorem states that in a right angle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides, more commonly phrased as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You then show a lot of work to get the idea that we already accepted from the teacher. You just proved the theory anyway from showing all these other basic pieces. So in Judaism, I think, Midrash, Haftorah, other stories are the proofs for the theorems shown in the Torah, right? And I'll use the Yitro example from episode 5, since we studied it a few episodes ago, that Torah said that Moses answered questions from morning till night before Jethro told him to find other leaders, right? We accepted it. He was a busy man. Not enough for the rabbis. There are now many other stories that help to explain what happened while he was answering questions all day and all night. So using context of the things that we knew from this story or from other stories that we have accepted as truth previously, we now have those other stories to further prove to us that Moses did, in fact, need to appoint other leaders.
Yes.
Comments, questions?
My brain went somewhere else when you were talking about math being in everything, and I don't think it's connected to what you were saying.
You can say it anyway.
The idea of using numbers in like Talmudic parlance is usually either just to mean non-mathematical things. So when they, the classic example is the prayer that we call Shemona Esrei, which means 18, has 19 blessings. And so, so what I say to my students all the time is numbers aren't math. Numbers, so when you say 18, you mean a lot. When you say 3, you mean a few.
Oh, in the Torah, numbers aren't math.
This is about the Talmud. I also think in the Torah it is also true, because no one lives to 997 years.
Right. Or like he made chieftains for the tens and hundreds and thousands, right? I always took that tens hundred as a lot. He made a lot of people.
That's true too.
Yeah.
So going back to Yitro, then that the tens and the hundreds are like small family group, community group, city group, and that they could even, they had some 600,000 men of fighting age that they counted in the book of Numbers. So how many more? And did they even conceive of 1 million? Like, did they know what that number was? I think they would just say a whole heck of a lot. And the fact that they said, Moses is 80 years old when he starts this journey and 120 when he dies, spoiler alerts. I
thought you said if it's older than 2 years, we're fine.
Right.
Story, it's like thousands of years. Very old. Thousands of years, which means very old.
Let's also assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know this stuff. So I don't think that it meant he had actually taken 80 trips around the sun. Literally, I think it meant he was old for his job. That he, 80 years old, he's 2/3 of the way done with the maximum a life could be. He's had experience, this is past his prime, but still pushing and doing it. And 120 is this like maximum age that a human could be. So Moses lived every extent of his life to the fullest.
I've never considered that interpretation. It's going to give me some food for thought.
Of that he's just old, that there's no age to him.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that really came to mind, RDY, as you were talking, was the idea of qualitative versus quantitative data to describe something. And, saying he's old versus he's 80 or he's 120. And this is, I think, one of the things that I internalized a lot from my degree, which is in sociology, was that typically you want both to be able to tell a story. You want both qualitative and quantitative data to really effectively tell a story or paint the picture of something for somebody.
I think that's the point. That's where the Midrash comes in. That's where all these extra stories come in, is that the Torah says a number and then the rabbis say he's old.
And also it's highly interpretive. And, to sit like my wife and I dwell comfortably in very different temperatures. And so she'll say, it's freezing in here. And I'll say it's 58 degrees. And that's not necessarily, that may or may not mean we disagree.
Wait, do you not find 58 degrees to be freezing?
I'm from Ohio, but
I'm from Jersey. That's cold.
So what I'm saying, why I give that example is because 58 is one of those numbers that, like, a lot of my Ohio native friends, like 50 degrees is shorts weather. But so you don't know from just the script whether I'm agreeing or disagreeing. Like, am I saying, yeah, it's 50 degrees, it's cold? Or am I saying it's 50 degrees and actually 32 degrees, it's freezing? So when you just have the words in front of you with no intonation, it makes them even more interpretive. And that's another reason why numbers aren't math.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, Ethan. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, and what is old? Like, you just basically said, well, what's cold? And I think the thing with Moses is, what is old?
Yeah, right. I was going to say that too, is that when this was written, right, I don't know when this was written, what the life expectancy was, but, life expectancy today is very different than it was 200 years ago. And so 200 years ago, they would have read 80 and said, well, that's old. And today we're like, well, that's like good. Yeah.
That's old.
Yeah, that's old. But, maybe he could have been 98 and he had another good 20 years in him if he needed.
Yeah.
Right. Like that as these things change. Right. I don't know what life expectancy was the time the Torah was written.
Can we also be clear on life expectancy for any of our, I don't want.
So, right. For those that are listening in the year 2355, I want to say that that life expectancy today, I think, is somewhere in 80 to 100. Would you guys agree with me?
I would say low 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say like mid to upper 70s.
Without looking it up.
Yeah. So just for historical context, as this is replaying in the Museum of the Future, that is what we mean by life expectancy. That's a good point. Because
back when death was a thing and before we uploaded our brains to the cloud.
It was before Barak and Ethan and RDY were the heroes of the golden age of podcasting and heralded like a Bill and Ted world of
well before that. So bow in our presence and just be excellent to each other.
Party on. So what I wanted to be clear about with life expectancy was, like, when life expectancy was 60 years old, it didn't mean someone got to 60 and died. Right. It meant it takes into the account infant mortality and dying in battle and kind of thing. It's all averaged.
Yeah. So, I mentioned the Midrash as the explanations for the theorems of the things that the Torah shows us to be proofs and truths already. Do you guys have any favorite Midrash stories that add on to stories that you already loved?
So many, almost too many to count, but I will say,
was that a math joke?
Yes. I will say that one that I love to tell. I'm sorry, I have to pick two because I can't count to one. So the first one that I love to tell is Abraham smashing the idols. And that story itself is so ubiquitous that I will often ask students, where do you find that story in the Torah? And the answer is, you don't. The other is the story of the angels at the closing of the sea. After the Israelites pass through the sea, the waters close on the Egyptians. And the Midrash goes that the angels started singing Michamocha along with the Israelites, singing the song of the sea that the Israelites sang in joy. And God scolded the angels in the Midrash, saying, how dare you sing when my children are dying?
Wait, isn't that in like your Passover Seder every year? How my creatures perish and you sing praises, something like that, right?
That is in many Passover Seders, and I think the concept of it is important. That you have.
Does that come from that Midrash? Is that where that comes from? Oh, yes. That's great.
And if I had to guess, I would say it's Shemot Rabbah, a collection of midrashim about the Book of Exodus. But yeah, that concept that in the Passover Seder, it's one of the reasons we take wine out of our cup is that because our freedom had to come with suffering of Egyptians, therefore we lessen our joy, and joy in the symbolized by wine, by taking out drop for every plague.
Yeah, and I will say, not that it bothers me, but once I learned about that, the habit of licking the end of the spoon of your finger when it's done, I am like such against that, and I don't want to tell people not to do it. I know. Okay, well, you're the rabbi. Everybody put your spoons down. We're doing it again.
I don't scold them if I see them doing it. I preempt it and tell them not to beforehand.
Oh, that's a nice.
So that
way more appropriate.
When I do the same thing when I see someone doing something, the quote unquote wrong way, then the next time we do the thing, I'll teach before.
Preempted. Yeah, I love that teaching of it, because it's you're taking it out to that's why we drop the drops of wine for the plagues against Egypt. Ethan, do you have one?
No.
Oh, good. I'll take his.
Yes, RDY gets two.
I have one that I've always really enjoyed, and I'm gonna. I hope I don't mess this up, because it's not a midrash from traditional learning. It's a midrash that a B'nai Mitzvah student had created at some point, and I think it went viral, which is how I heard about it. And it's when he was talking about the sacrifice of Isaac, the binding of Isaac, and his portion was the following book starts with the death of Sarah, right? Like the binding of Isaac, the death
following
of Sarah.
Parsha, yeah.
Yeah. So he created this connection of and I don't remember all of it. So please, listeners, go look it up and correct me, send me emails, but learn about this, because I thought it was genius that Sarah came home, found that Abraham and Isaac were not home, and worried because they weren't. So she followed them up the mountain, or I think there was something that made her think that something bad was going to happen. So she followed them up the mountain in hiding and hid in the bushes in the skin of a goat.
Oh, so she was sacrificed.
And that essentially that she was the one who was sacrificed, because there's no other mention of her except that the portion of the binding of Isaac ends. They sacrifice the animal from the bushes, and the next parsha just starts with, and Sarah was dead. And so it was such an interesting connection. And I don't remember why Abraham would have killed her. I think God said, there's something in the bushes, whatever the language is.
Lift your eyes.
Yeah, right. That for whatever reason, he ended up killing his wife, Sarah. Again, I don't remember all of it. I just remember when I first heard that, thinking like, how this B'nai Mitzvah student made this really unique connection to the Parsha, and he dives into like the reasons behind it. So please go listen to it, because I'm not doing it justice. But I thought that is one of my favorite midrash around the stories that we get in the Torah, just adding further explanation to it. Yeah.
Another one that I like in that same Akedah narrative is that, the line, take your son, your unique son, the one you love, Isaac, and that God is telling Abraham to bring Isaac up to be sacrificed on Mount Moriah. A midrash turns that statement into a dialogue where God says, take your son, and Abraham says, which one? I have two. Your unique son. Oh, well, Ishmael is unique to his mother, and Isaac is unique to his mother. You're the one you love. I'm a father. I love both of my sons. Isaac.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. Is this, we accepted it. The Torah portion came out. If we just read that, what you said, okay, I get it. And then that rabbi then took that dialogue and expanded upon it with things that we already accepted as truths previously. He's got two kids. He loves both of them. This one's unique for this reason. Like, we already knew all those things. And they took that and said, here's the theorem is Isaac is the one who's supposed to be sacrificed. Here's my proof, right? I love that's perfect. That's exactly it.
I will also say I have a midrash. It's not like a written out story midrash, but I midrashically have explained that Isaac is special needs, which is part of why Abraham might have been so willing to sacrifice him. There's something about him that is not the same as the majority of society, and that difference caused him to be taken care of all his life. As a child, he's taken care of by Sarah, and as an adult, he's taken care of by Rebecca. Like he doesn't drive his own narrative at any point in the Torah.
It's a very interesting take. I think, are you saying that he was more willing to sacrifice because he was struggling with having Isaac as a child?
That is one of my suggestions to, that when Abraham is told to go, that God is going to destroy these complete strangers to him, he argues. He says, hey, God, what if I find 50 good people? Will you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? And then God says, kill your son. And he goes, okay, and doesn't argue and goes up the mountain.
That's so interesting. I don't know. Again, very interesting concept. It reduces my previous thoughts of the conversation is very quick in the Torah, but I think all the times I've studied this portion, there's always this internal struggle and dialogue that we don't get, that the Midrash sometimes gives us. And I feel like that by giving us a reason for why he was so accepting to do it, takes away from all the previous study I've done of that was this is such a hard thing, to give us a reason for him to say, okay. And I agree with you. There must've been something that made him say, okay, because he saved this entire village of other people that he has no connection to.
I think he might have been relieved.
Maybe he was in a different mindset that day. I'll tell you, there's some days where I do not want to argue with my kids, right? And the other days I go, I'm going to sit I totally here with you, buddy. Struggle all you want. I am not moving, right? Maybe that was maybe he caught Abraham on a bad day. And he's like, fine, I haven't had I got terrible sleep last night. Coffee hasn't been invented yet. Whatever it is. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's a more generous interpretation, I think, but RDY, what you're proposing as a thought experiment, changes the story, I think, in potentially some very significant ways.
And I hope it's in a way, to acknowledging that that no matter what kind of Judaism we follow, Reform, Orthodox, Reconstructionist, whatever, if we say the Avot prayer, and whether we use the 3 Avot only, whether we add 4 Imahot or 6 Imahot, however we say the Avot prayer, we use Isaac as one of the people after whom we should be praising God, about whom we should be praising God. And so if he was a special needs person, all the more so we should be praising all of our special needs people and using them as examples of righteousness and how we should live our lives.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you sharing it. Any other favorite Midrash before I move on to my next mathematical point?
I could do this all day.
Thanks, Cap. All right, so I'll move on to my next point, and we will save your other Midrash stories for all of our future episodes. Stay tuned.
In the year 2355.
All right, so the reason people don't agree with me that math isn't everything is that we don't think about doing math in every action that we have, right? You don't calculate how far to expand your chest when you breathe, or calculate the angle of your feet when you walk, or how much force you use to open a door. You just do it. Those things they're very natural to you, but all of them, to me, at its core, have math included in them. And so
what about
driving
a car? Yeah, what about driving a car?
What about it? You tell me this machinery built on mathematical engineering calculations is
No. I'm not arguing against you. I'm saying a lot of the examples you gave are
bodily,
personal. Yeah,
correct. Bodily, personal, sure. Unconscious.
Yeah.
Driving a car, conscious. When I'm going, I am gauging how far I have to brake. I'm gauging my acceleration. I'm gauging
you weren't
how
challenging. You're
turn.
adding, 100%.
Yeah, I'm building upon.
Oh,
I'm building upon.
I think there's things that we learn
defensively. That's the case. That's how you should be driving. But most people drive with unconscious competence.
But even in those situations, you know you have to accelerate to beat the red. So you have to push your foot down a certain angle to get the right acceleration you need, right? You know that these things you have to do mathematically in order to get the output that you want.
But even before you're making the decision to press on the accelerator, you're making a snap decision. I'm going at this speed. I'm this far away from the light that just turned yellow.
100%.
Am I going to go? Am I going to not go? And
right,
you are very quickly.
Your brain does all those mathematical calculations in a split second. 100%.
But that's also based on doing that calculus is based on a false premise. The premise being green means go, red means stop, yellow means go as fast as you can. Whereas really yellow means stop.
What?
And yellow means stop unless you can't.
Yes.
It must be different in Texas.
It's different everywhere. But what it should be is yellow means stop unless you absolutely cannot.
100. They're right. They use slow down as the term because if you're in the intersection, it turns yellow. Slowing down would mean you'd cause an accident in the intersection. Yeah. But slowing down beforehand means that you'd be able to stop at the red light. Yeah. So no, I appreciate you adding on to my proof because, as I said, I am a firm believer that math can be found in everything in the world, conscious, unconscious, bodily, nature, whatever. And I think that Judaism is very similar, right? And, growing up, I was a Reformed Jew, and people always said that I was so Jewish. And I think we talked about this in the previous one, that I didn't consider myself to be quote, so Jewish. I just, I practiced, I went to Friday night services frequently. I did religious school. I volunteered at my synagogue. And I think was living, I don't know if I talked about them, but I knew that I lived my Jewish values in a way that maybe if somebody asked me, I might respond with an answer from religious school, but they would say that I'm so Jewish. But to me, it's just acting out my normal life. But for them, right, similar to when I talk about this math stuff, they go, wow, you are a geek. You think math isn't everything. It's the same thing to me on the Jewish side. They're, wow, you are so Jewish. I'm just a Reformed Jew. That's how I view myself. That is my life. So I think I just acknowledge it more than others, right? When we are polite, when we stop to listen, many of these things we probably learned from religious school or from our parents or family members, and they are part of who we are now. These are things that we just do that Judaism tells us to do. Shema, listen, right? And we do that, but it's not that you have to put those into effect. It's that is who you are because Judaism is a part of who you are. Make sense?
This made me think of the I don't know if it's a parable, but the idea of, if you asked a fish to describe what water is, they couldn't do it because it's just what they exist in and what they swim in. And that is what popped into my mind as you were speaking.
Right. But if fish, if they stayed in school like they're supposed to, there probably would have been a class that would have taught them about water, right? We are living in a third dimension. If somebody then had a class on what is 4 dimensions, we'd be able to explain it, but we can't because we live in a third dimension, right? I think that's if you have the knowledge about it, you can participate in it. We have theories about the 4th dimension, so we can theorize of what that looks like, but we are constantly living in a 3-dimensional world, and so that's how we experience it. We digress. Back to living Jewishly.
I totally agree that your concept of math being in everything and therefore Judaism is in everything. I think that's just how I view the world in general. So it's almost doesn't need a reaction because it's well, of course, I guess I'm the fish in that water of Judaism.
Yeah. And I bet a lot, granted, you're a rabbi, so you probably get it more frequently than I do or did growing up. But people be wow, you're a rabbi? You are Jewish. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Right. But to you, and I'm sure that people who are, Orthodox or modern Orthodox get that all the time. And to them, they are just being Jewish. If they're not super Jews to themselves, they are just behaving in the way that is natural for them. Each person has their own level of these pieces. I just think that if you grew up with these pieces, that a lot of them are just natural to you, or you can discover how natural they are to our everyday living.
And by that same token, the Orthodox rabbi in a world of Orthodox Jews, and I'm talking like black hat Orthodox, they might not seem wow, so religious, and even if they did, it wouldn't be a big deal to their community because everybody does it that way. This is just us looking in.
Yeah, 100%. And I still think that, like, and there are many of other people that would disagree with this statement, right? That math, I believe math isn't everything, right? So everything you do, whether you're conscious of it or not, it's there. Similarly, I think that the things that are part of Judaism are in everything, and that whether you're Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, Modern Orthodox, Reconstructionist, that Judaism is a part of what you do. It might just be explained differently based on how you practice Judaism, but I believe that all of the, maybe in Reformed Judaism, it's based a lot more in, right, the values and things, how we behave, as opposed to some other pieces. Although that I would say the other sects of Judaism also consider those values to be very important and probably also exhibit those things day to day. And so that, right, I'm not saying that Judaism isn't everything we do because we have a prayer for everything that we do, which we do. We just don't practice those regularly. But the things that even we're not praying for, there is a part of Judaism that connects to that part of it. Waking up, going to the bathroom, being nice to somebody else, taking shelter, yada, 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 right?
It's there automatically, but it's important that we acknowledge it. And again, like, I had never thought of the idea that math is in everything, but as soon as you started explaining it, I agree. It's totally true that you got to learn the math before you can learn the physics, before you can learn the metaphysics. Mm-hmm. And we're to deal with that base. That's what Judaism is with life. Like, life is so much more complicated than it is in our sacred texts. And yet humans are not.
Right. Yeah.
Technology changes, people do not.
Yeah. Well, I think you're spot on that. Like, if it's not acknowledged, you won't know. Right. Mm-hmm. As I said, I studied math, and I think for whatever reason, at some point, it became very obvious to me that every part of life has mathematics in it. I am sure that you, Rabbi, have a very similar idea regarding Judaism, that as somebody who studies and practices this regularly day in, day out, you already had this concept inside of you that Judaism can be found in everything, 100%.
To respond to that in a way that would drive math people crazy, I agree with you 110%.
Yeah, right? But the other people who are listening to this podcast who neither are math majors or practice Judaism regularly might now have this concept to be able to step back for a second and look at the world around you. And in a, what's the movie where he like sees the math equations?
A Beautiful Mind.
Thank you. Right. You step back for a second and have this beautiful mind moment and see, kindness and listening and one God and study Torah around everywhere you go, because you are now witnessing Judaism in your everyday life. You might also now take a moment and recognize that everything has math in it as well. So there's like an equation piece to it. But I think there's like different sides of these coins. Again, this is another reason why I wanted to have this podcast, is that I think that Judaism can be found in every single thing that we do. So to focus on these things that we were excited about in nerd culture, I think I'll challenge us and say that I don't think this podcast is going to be a challenge, because we will constantly have new content coming out or that we can build back on and have these conversations, because Judaism is in everything.
I mean, in our previous episode, I shared a quote from Captain Picard from Star Trek, and RDY's response was, "That sounds pretty Jewish to me."
Yeah. And even the ones that aren't obvious, right? I think that we will find these connections for you. And I want to wrap up soon. So I want to ask, I would digress if I didn't ask this question on my.
I want to wrap up soon, so I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah, 100%. This is going to. I was often one of the last people out of my synagogue every time. I have to wrap up the door. So let me just ask you one more question before we wrap up. Any favorite math subjects? What is your favorite math subject growing up? I want to put a love in this area. I see the eye rolls. You'll find an answer. I trust you.
For me, it was definitely geometry. And I've tried to figure out why it was geometry. Like, what was it there? Because I know every place is different. We did algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2. And then at that time, I didn't have to take a year 4 of math, but I chose to, and I did pre-calculus.
Nice. Applause to you, sir, for taking an extra math. Love that.
Yeah.
Pre-cal.
Nerd cred. I really like geometry, and I think what it was that I liked about it was solving a puzzle. It was using logic to solve a puzzle. And I know that is a lot of what math is, but there was something about the way geometry presented it that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the challenge of it.
Nice.
I will say my 7th and 8th grade math teacher was the same person. I had Mr. Alexander in both 7th and 8th grade, and not because I failed one year, but because he taught both. And he was a wonderful teacher, and really, in addition to teaching mathematics, taught us a lot about how to be a mensch. And he used to say that we needed to know how to calculate in our heads because we wouldn't be carrying calculators in our pockets. So I just want to show, I just want Mr. Alexander to see my iPhone just one time.
I wonder what he uses nowadays as his explanation for why, because you won't have a calculator on you when you need it. That's
because I said so.
I love that this is a podcast and you still held up your phone with the calculator app open.
I saw him hold up an actual calculator. He's like, I carry this in my pocket all the time.
I want him to see
TI 85
phone.
Yeah. That's very funny. Ethan, my favorite subject was geometry for a while too. And then I took pre-calc, and then pre-calc became my favorite subject. Mm-hmm. And then in college, I had mentioned this, that my senior one of 2 senior seminars I took. One of my senior seminars was cryptology and code breaking. And that immediately skyrocketed to my favorite math subject, because if you want a class on problem solving, I really envisioned that our final was going to be us like strapped to the desk, taped to the chairs with flash, like lights going and alarms blaring. And we've got to find a way to get out of this place before the test expires, sort of thing.
That escape rooms are one of my favorite things to do in general. So we should definitely talk about that at some point.
I just, the idea of not just like learning different ciphers, multiple different ciphers, but like where they came from and why they were created and the history behind them, to get that piece of the explanation and not just here's a proof, study it and repeat it back to me wrote, the other pieces of the history of how these things came to be. So cool. So if you have the chance, I would take cryptology and code breaking from Dr. Katarzyna Patashka at Ramapo College.
Awesome.
Yeah. So great. Anybody have any other math things they want to throw out while we're here in this topic? Because I doubt people want me to do this again.
I got nothing.
Yeah, that's sort of the reaction I get all the time at school.
I will say that if I could have taken a cryptology and code breaking class at Bradley University, I would have.
Yeah.
But I took calculus in high school. And then in my freshman year in college, I took algebra 1 just because I needed a math credit and they didn't care. And I was a theater major, so they really didn't care. And
theater includes tons of math, I'm telling you.
Yes, especially scenic construction.
100%.
I definitely used it, but it was more, it's more arithmetic. You count the number that you need, and then you cut there. Measure twice and cut once.
Right. Nice. All right, cool. So let me just finish by saying that I hope that at least your appreciation for math has grown just a little bit because of this episode. It's not often that people are excited when I share that I earned my bachelor's degree in mathematics, or that they fully understand what I do when I say I'm a Jewish professional. And perhaps we've discovered that mathematics and Judaism are a bit like parallel lines. They may never meet, but they still have so much in common.
Aww.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. This episode is supported in part by Sinai and Synapses, which offers people a worldview that is both scientifically grounded and spiritually uplifting. They provide tools and language for learning and living to those who see science as their ally as they pursue personal growth and the repair of our world. Sinai and Synapses equip scientists, clergy, and dedicated laypeople with knowledge and skills to become role models, ambassadors, and activists for grappling with the biggest and most important questions we face. To learn more, visit www.sinaiandsynapses.org. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, email us directly, find previous episodes, and more. And to paraphrase Einstein, let us not forget that human knowledge and skills alone cannot lead humanity to a happy and dignified life. Only listening to Torah Smash can do that.
The one thing that I may be worse about than Star Trek, math.